Everyone. Welcome to our Somerset's panel discussion on our fire and rescue service. And I want to thank all the participants for making time for this important discussion and question and answer period. And what we're going to do today is we're going to hear from the three departments that agencies, whatever you want to call it, that serve our town, which is the Bethesda Fire Department, the Glen Echo Fire Department, and the Bethesda Chevy Chase Rescue Squad. And we're going to hear, and this is basically an information session and discussion, because for years residents have wanted to have more information on these great departments and squads. And so each of the departments is going to make a 5-minute presentation to talk about their the service they provide and how hopefully how residents can assist or get involved. And then we'll have questions from our town council, and then questions from residents and a discussion. So, and we're going to start with the Bethesda Fire Department, and our presenters are going to be Interim Chief Michael Kay, who grew up in Somerset, as I talked about before, and also former Councilmember Barbara Condos, who serves on the Board of Directors. So with that, before we begin, I have to ask our town manager to read the disclaimer.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So just as a reminder for everybody, for records keeping purposes, we are recording our meetings in Town of Somerset. As the mayor went over the schedule, so there will be an opportunity for folks to ask questions. The most effective and best way to do so is to use the raise hand function on Zoom, and then I can call on you. If you do have a question, please just state your name, and if you're a resident of Somerset, please let us know what street you live on. And then the last disclaimer is, if for some reason we get Zoom bombed or this meeting gets interrupted, we'll put a stop to the meeting and we'll send out new instructions to restart it.
And the town manager is going to give a reminder, because we're going to do 5 minutes for each presentation, so we have enough time for discussion and questions. So if you could, we're not going to be that strict about it, but we like you to limit it to 5 minutes. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to the Bethesda Fire Department.
Hi, everybody. I'm Barbara Condos. I'm a resident of Somerset, Falstern Avenue, and the town's representative on the Bethesda Fire Department Board of Directors. I'm just going to do a little history, and then I will turn it over to our board president and interim chief of operations, Michael Kay. The Bethesda Fire Department, Inc., the official name, was established in 1926 as a Maryland not-for-profit corporation staffed by volunteer firefighters to meet the need for more efficient and mobile firefighting in the Bethesda Chevy Chase area. BFD, Bethesda Fire Department, purchased 2 LaFrance engines, one of which has been restored and stops by at the Somerset 4th of July celebration and at the open house, an educational and fun event held at Station 6 to thank the community for their support. The Bethesda Fire Department Board of Directors today draws its members from civic associations, municipalities, the Bethesda Chamber of Congress, and most recently from its operational members. All nominated board members go through the same BFD vetting process. The Bethesda Fire Department owns 3 stations: Station 6 at Bradley in Wisconsin, Station 20 at Old Georgetown Road and Cedar Lane, and Station 26 on Democracy Boulevard near I-70. BFD is responsible for the care, improvement, and maintenance of these stations. In addition, it provides special equipment as requested by the career and operational staff and provides community outreach and education. The Montgomery County Fire and Rescue Service career members staff all 3 stations. In 2018, returning to its origins, BFD established an operations unit, which currently provides emergency ambulance service out of Station 6 on nights and weekends, periods when this service is not provided by the county career staff. BFD is a 501c3 corporation, which is supported through community fundraising, governmental and private grants, and other means. And I will now turn you over to Michael Kay, who is, as I said, the president of our board of directors and our interim chief of operations.
Thank you, Barbara. This will be general to all of the departments that are represented. So Montgomery County is a combined fire and rescue service. There are both volunteer and career staff. Each of the various departments has their own commitments with the county as far as what operational component they will be providing to the county. As Barbara said, we started in January of 2018, bringing back an operational component on a volunteer side from Bethesda. The county staffs an ambulance out of Station 6, Bradley in Wisconsin, 5 days, weekdays from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. And our goal is to staff the ambulance from 5 p.m. to 7 a.m. weekdays and weekends. There's one thing I just want to make clear. No matter where you live, you may see ambulance 706, which is out of Bethesda. You may see a BCC ambulance, which Ned can talk to, or you may see a Glen Echo ambulance that says 711 on it, which either Andy or Victor can talk to. And the way the county works, when you call 911, they look at the resources required and they send the next available units. So whether it's Bethesda or Glen Echo or BCC, we are all trained to come in and hopefully help you with whatever your emergency is. I think Barbara did a good summary, and I want to leave time for everybody else. So thank you for inviting us to talk today.
Thank you very much. Next, we have the Glen Echo Fire Department. Again, it's Board President Andrew O'Brien and Lieutenant Victor Graves.
Great, thank you for letting us join today. As you mentioned, I'm Andy O'Brien. I'm the president of the Conduit Road Fire Board, which operates the Glen Echo Fire Department. And joining me here is Lieutenant Victor Graves, who's our operations officer. Our chief, William Dunn, wasn't able to participate today, but sends his thoughts and eager to look for ways to work more closely with the residents of Somerset. In terms of brief history of our department, we were chartered by the state of Maryland in 1933 as the Conduit Road Fire Board, originally operating a station in the town of Glen Echo proper. And then 1954, we moved to our current location, which is at the corner of Mass Ave and Sangamore Road. We have about 60 volunteers right now. And in terms of units, we have there's and as Michael Kay mentioned, the combined service. We have an engine unit, 2 ambulances, a ALS chase car, and then our UTV, which it comes in handy with our service. Primary first due area runs from the Potomac River up to River Road, Western Avenue down to Wilson. So that part of the county. So we do end up with a fair number of calls on the C&O Canal and Capitol Crescent Trail. We do, as Michael Kay mentioned, we do, depending on the need, our ALS unit we'll end up in Somerset and sort of our second due area, Fairmount, and then depending on the time and day and what other calls are being run by other units, we will provide service into Somerset. Victor, I don't know if there's anything you'd add to that, but that's just sort of a brief overview of us.
Lieutenant Gray, do you want to add anything?
I think that, Andy, you covered it quite well, as Michael K. We're pleased to have the opportunity to be here today and answer any questions that any of you may have or the members of the community may have. And particularly thankful for the opportunity to interact with the community because oftentimes they have questions and they like to know about why we send all that apparatus out for what they think is a relatively minor call. And they sometimes like to know about why people wear different uniforms and come from all these different stations. So we're here to help answer those questions for you.
And thank you. And we also we appreciate in Somerset that you send Santa for our kids at Christmas time.
That's one of our
very much appreciated. And last but not least, we have the Bethesda Chevy Chase Rescue Squad, Chief Ned Sherburne, and Vice President of the Board, John Bendavaglio, who I believe lives in the town of Chevy Chase.
Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
You should have a virtual meeting in Somerset.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So want to thank you for having the opportunity to do this. I'm Ned Sherburne. I'm the chief of BCC Rescue Squad. I've been a member since 1978, and I've been the chief of the department for a little over 20 years. I've worked with many different administrations in Somerset and Bethesda Fire Department and Glen Echo, and we're glad to be here. We are a little bit younger than the rest of the departments. We didn't start until 1945, but we are an integrated part of the fire and rescue system in Montgomery County and have been for quite a while. We're going to talk briefly in this 5-minute time frame about service, BCC personnel, training, and then John Benevolio, our vice president, is going to talk about governance and oversight and a proposal to make sure that everything goes well with the expanding staffing at Station 6 for the ambulance. So real quickly, our main station, we operate out of Battery Lane and Old Georgetown Road. It's about 2 miles from the town of Somerset. We split the responses, as previously mentioned, with Bethesda, who is closest, and with with Glen Echo, who is the second closest. Although actually in a teeny bit of Somerset, they are first closest. Generally, the line is Dorset Avenue. We also operate a satellite unit at Bethesda Fire Department Station 26 at Montgomery Mall. That's ambulance 726. Our daily 24/7, 365 service is 4 EMS transport units, which includes a basic unit, which is sort of more for minor injuries and oxygen and Band-Aids and that kind of stuff, and then 1 paramedic unit. We operate a heavy rescue squad, which is a technical rescue unit, which goes to fires and accidents and other stuff. And we staff all of that apparatus with BCC personnel, except for 1 ALS chase car, which is staffed by a single paramedic by the county, Monday through Friday, 7 to 5. We go to about 8,000 calls a year from all these different places, which is about 1 every hour. Moving on to people, we have 164 credentialed MCFRS providers and another 35 recruits and candidates in training. And I just want to emphasize that we have a fully certified command staff of 4 folks that I lead, in addition to 13 line officers, captains, or lieutenants, about 20 paramedics, and more than 50 emergency drivers. That includes ambulances and heavy apparatus. We are really, really, really big on training. Just sort of some quick looks at computers show that about 19,000 worth of hours in training in the last fiscal year. We have a robust program for training emergency medical technicians, which includes a fairly significant field service or field training program after they graduate EMT, paramedic program, emergency vehicle training, and the squad program for the technical rescue is almost equivalent to the paramedic level training, what people have to do after they take basic classes. So we really are big believers in training. With that going on, I'm going to let John take over on corporate governance.
Thanks, Ned, and thanks to the Town of Somerset for convening this group. I'll just say one thing about the training and the people. One of the reasons we presented this information, because as the other departments know, operating a volunteer fire rescue agency requires constant nurturing of volunteers at the command level, at the officer level, at the entry level service provider, and then with new recruits. And with the training, that's essential to ensure that over the long run, as we have for many years, we can provide the highest level of service, meet the same training standards as the career folks, with an almost with primarily a volunteer cadre of paramedics, firefighters, and EMTs. So that's why we emphasize the training, and we know the other departments appreciate the point that it's to operate a volunteer fire rescue agency in this day and age with the training and sophistication required. It requires a constant process for training folks, for developing talent and expertise, and having a pipeline of people coming in so that we can provide that service over the long run. Just I won't read the slides, but just a little bit on corporate governance. We have a 12-member board of directors. We meet 20 plus times a year. It's quite the commitment. We have really worked hard to have a diverse array of members on the board of directors in terms of race, gender, professional background. We think that diversity is a strength of ours. And we're currently in the process of developing a strategic plan. As Bethesda evolves, you know, the construction, the development, the demographic changes, we're trying to change with it to meet the needs. And we take some pride in our corporate governance. We think it's important for the long-term health and success of a volunteer agency to have good corporate governance. And we pay a lot of attention to the standards issued by charity groups and others, charity oversight agencies, to ensure that we have really strong, robust corporate governance. And you can get more information about that on our website. The final topic I want to address just briefly, Ned, if you could advance the slide, is a proposal to staff ambulance 706. I should have mentioned that, like Mayor Slavin said, I live on Walsh Street, 3 blocks from Station 6. I may live closer than almost any other volunteer member that's in our departments. Like Mike Kay said, it's currently staffed with career personnel during weekdays from 7 to 5, and Bethesda has been increasing staffing with volunteers at additional times that he mentioned. We've worked with the county fire chief and recently submitted a proposal to the Bethesda Fire Board, Board of Directors, to increase and provide guaranteed volunteer staffing on nights and on weekends. Like Mike Kay said, or maybe Barbara mentioned it, there are significant call volumes in the evenings and on weekends where the career staffing is not available. So we've provided a proposal to jointly staff that with Bethesda volunteers. We think it's important as volunteer organizations that additional staffing, which is something that county fire chief has made a priority, is provided by qualified volunteers. We've worked collaboratively with Bethesda for decades. Ned mentioned the ambulance that we operate out of Bethesda Station 26 up by Montgomery Mall. And, you know, we're open to working collaboratively with Bethesda to provide volunteer staffing on a guaranteed basis in those nights and weekend time periods where there's significant call volume and an identified need for additional EMS transport service. So with that, I'll conclude the rescue squad's remarks. And again, if you want more information, we try to be very transparent in our operations and governance. And there's a lot of information on our website if you have questions about the services we provide or how we go about doing our work.
And I would just add one quick thing. We did go very quickly through the slides, but we assume that these will be available through the town of Somerset to those that want them. So we just wanted to have something written.
Yes, thank you. And we can put this on our website, and we can also put information about the other two on our website. I also want to mention that there are several Somerset residents who are volunteers with the BCC, and we appreciate that. I think one of them is on the phone today, Steve Friedman. So with that, we will now entertain questions or comments from our town council, starting with our council president, Marnie Shaw.
First, let me thank all of you for your presentation, but more than that, for your service to the community. I have some really basic questions because I'm not, other than seeing your names, I don't have a good understanding of how you're set up. So you've all talked about some career staff and some volunteers, and I'd be interested in knowing organization by organization, sort of the number of career staff, and in addition, the number of volunteers, and then who pays the career staff? Is that some part of the county or whatever? So that's kind of, I have a real sort of basic organizational question.
So let's go one by one. So if Bethesda could start.
Sure, thank you. So and this goes for all the stations, the career staff are employees of Montgomery County government and paid by Montgomery County government. Bethesda, again, has 3 stations. There are, I believe, 5 career staff at both stations 20 and 26, excluding a battalion chief. There are 4 staff people on duty on any given period, and then the other one is a rotate in and out. Station 6 has 9 people day side, 7 people night side, because there are 4 on the engine, 3 on the truck. The 2 day side are for the ambulance. So the staffing provided by the volunteers is when the career staff is not there. We also do up staff during the day, not all the time, where they will then take a firefighter off of the ambulance and put the firefighter on the truck or on the engine as we take over a minimum staffing position on the ambulance. We currently have about 30 people on what the county calls its IECS, Emergency Integrated Command Structure list. Of that, we have about 10 qualified minimum staffing individuals, and we've been staffing with that. The other 20 are in process anywhere, as John was kind of saying, between that recruit candidate going through transition EMT class. Somebody can correct me, but it takes anywhere from about, I'm going to say, a year to 18 months from the time that you join an organization until you have all the necessary minimum training to be minimum qualified to ride on the units, or at least on an EMS transport unit.
Okay, Glen Echo, would you like to answer that?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So on our end, we have 6 of the county career per shift in our station. We have about 42 members currently on the IECS list that Michael K mentioned. You know, our staffing on the volunteer side is predominantly, like most folks, on the nights and weekends. An example though, during the county's surge response for, with the COVID pandemic, we did staff our Bravo ambulance, our second ambulance, entirely volunteer based, 24 hours a day during the surge. And so, it was sort of deployed all around the county to help as a flex unit, but the majority of the time our staffing is primarily on the volunteer side anyway, on the nights and weekends, and then 24 hours a day with the 6 county personnel.
Okay, BCC.
So just one quick correction. Our employees are not all paid by the county. We have 11 full-time employees that are paid by BCC donated funds. We only have a single MCFRS position, that paramedic that I mentioned, Monday through Friday. All of the rest of the staffing is provided by BCC. Out of the 164 credentialed people we have, those 11 paid personnel are included in that. So there's about 150 remaining volunteers, and they staff 7 night crews, which provides a guaranteed response for all those units in addition to the day crew. And I will say that there is some mixing of staff. For example, we do have 1 night crew right now where they asked to detail people to a daytime shift, and there's a paid person covering nighttime shifts. So we're not exclusively nighttime volunteer, daytime paid. There's a little bit of mix, but it's all done with those 11 paid positions. That's it.
So just one follow-up, when you all say that they're paid for by the county, is that through the county fire department or some other part of the county?
Just real quick, while I still have the floor, the county tax funded employees and all the corporations are paid for out of, if you look closely at your real estate tax assessment bill, you'll see a fire tax district fund on there, and it comes out of that, and it's administered through Montgomery County Fire and Rescue Service under Chief Goldstein. Our 11 paid personnel that I was referring to are paid for out of donated funds that we solicit from the community.
Thank you so very much. That was very helpful.
Michael or Andy, do you want to add anything to that?
Nothing on my end, no.
Okay, President Shaw, you still have the floor.
That was it. I don't have any other questions right now.
Thank you. Councilmember Zoidhauser.
I too want to thank you all for your service. We've called 911 in our 35 years here in town, probably maybe 4 times. And I can't say I know which of you showed up, but each and every time the service has been gold star, fabulous. So thank you all. I do have a question, and that is, how do you decide where to go, which hospital to go to, if you need to go to a hospital? Is it by the condition of the person, or is it, do they tell you where you have to go? I was just curious about that.
We have to address that question. Lieutenant Graves from Glen Echo Fire Department. The answer to the question is we have a set of protocols, which are essentially directions from our medical director through MEAMS, which is a statewide organization, which indicates that in cases where the condition of the patient is such that it is essential to move them to the closest appropriate facility, we're going to go to the closest facility. So if we have someone with a cardiac condition that is really a threat to their life, we're not going to be taking them 2 or 3 hospitals away. We're going to take them to the closest appropriate facility. What we mean by the closest appropriate facilities, each facility is accredited for certain types of patient care. We have stroke facilities, cardiac facilities, trauma facilities. We will take the patient with life-threatening conditions to the facility that has a capability of providing the best for them that is closest to us at the time. For example, if we have a patient who has a traumatic injury, a trauma condition, a car accident, fall from a ladder that's serious, that patient generally is going to go to Suburban if Suburban has the capacity to take the patient. If not, we have additional hospitals, which might be the Washington Hospital Center or even Fairfax and Nova. Some situations, they might be flown to Baltimore. If, however, the patient's condition is not life-threatening, we take a look at what resources we have available. And if at that time the call load in the county permits, we will transport that patient to a different facility in the patient's request. For example, in your community, patients often request to go to Sibley instead of Suburban. So if the family wishes to go to Sibley and there is no medical reason that we need to transport them to a closer facility and we're not overwhelmed with calls in the county, we're going to try to accommodate the family's request. This is a very, very service-oriented county, both with the Montgomery County Fire Rescue as well as all the local fire rescue departments. We want to work with the community when we can.
Great, thank you. And
Does anyone else want to answer that?
Mayor, I would like just to add one thing. Just one thing that often comes up at community meetings is, and maybe less so now because everybody has gotten quite an education with COVID, but people always used to be surprised that hospitals do close. So, we have to honor requests when an emergency room says that they're overwhelmed. And also during COVID, hopefully this won't occur again, but if we were to experience another wave like we did in April, there was some low demand management going on where county EMS officers were monitoring each hospital's capacity and were directing ambulances to hospitals capable of filling need. So in that case, there was no patient choice usually involved. So, hopefully we won't experience that again, but that was an issue that we've had to deal with in the past.
great, thank you. And speaking of COVID, I have another question, and that is, what are you all doing to protect your volunteer and career folks from COVID? And then also, what are you doing to protect the people that you're serving? In other words, if are you testing people regularly to make sure they're not testing your volunteers to make sure they're not asymptomatic, to protect the people you're serving? And again, what are you doing to protect your own folks from calls that you're making to homes that may be infected?
So let me take that as the first shot, and then other people can comment. So Montgomery County has had a very robust COVID response plan, and actually I serve as the deputy branch director for the volunteer division of the county's response, and that's sort of in a couple of different places. So first thing, we have modified in terms of protection of us, we have modified our response plans. So the first thing that will happen is a dispatcher will ask, is there any person with COVID symptoms for any 911 call? This would be a police call, a fire call, anything, EMS call. If they identify that there's either somebody with COVID or somebody with symptoms in the house, we have a modified procedure where we will minimize our contact and send the minimum number of people in we can in proper protective equipment And I will say right now, because we've done a good job at purchasing and managing protective equipment on a countywide basis, that's currently not an issue. I don't say that it will never be, because, you know, things could get really bad, but right now that's not an issue, and they've done a lot of proactive things. So people will, based on symptoms, based on the type of medical procedures they're performing, they will use the appropriate PPE to protect themselves. If they believe they have an exposure unprotected by PPE, then there's a whole medical process to go through. But if a person is properly protected, that's not a medical exposure. I will say, over the time of the pandemic, we have had very low numbers in terms of impacted fire rescue personnel, and our information supports the fact that our main risk is in the station and not on calls, as long as we're properly protected. So that sort of moves to your next question. And I also want to just sort of emphasize, there are some really scary things that have occurred in New York, Florida, you know, the Texas area, where they've had these real super crushes of patients. And, you know, I don't want to say that can't happen here, but fortunately, the amount of time that an EMS person spends with a COVID positive patient is much less than an emergency physician that's in an emergency department or an ICU with a patient for a full 12 or 16-hour shift. So moving on to what we're doing. We have offered testing to personnel. It is not mandatory at this point. However, we have a very rigorous screening process, and we're holding people to all of the state mandates about travel and all that kind of stuff. You know, and as I said, we have seen a very low rate, although it's not zero, but we've seen a very low rate in the stations. And, you know, obviously we have providers that are varying ages. You know, so we're very concerned about this. And then finally, we have done a lot of stuff on decon and decontamination, cleaning up after calls, using ionizing sprayers, you know, drastically changing decon, changing the equipment that we're taking in, so we contaminate the minimum amount of stuff. You know, there's a whole litany of stuff. And I will say a shout out to the Bethesda Rotary. They were able to receive a grant, which we're still trying to finish procuring the equipment, but that's going to result in equipment going to everybody on this call. That is some additional Victory sprayers and UVC lights to decontaminate units. You know, once we clear the purchasing, and also the county is requiring some safety training for the UV lights to make sure that you know, there's no personal injury in that from using the UVC light. So I'm sorry, that's a long answer, but
That's perfect.
there's a lot going on with COVID. And, you know, I'm knocking on wood that hopefully this is only going to be preparation that we'll never use, but there's a lot of great concern about the potential for a second wave, which is sort of the reason why Dr. Gales is taking the position he is with the schools. And I'm not trying to get into that argument, but I just want to say there's a lot of concern on county and part of the county healthcare providers that we're not done with this yet. So we're really preparing.
Do Bethesda or Glen Echo want to add anything to that?
Yes, Barbara Condos has raised her hand.
I could have waited till the end. I wasn't sure how it worked. But anyway, I forgot to mention Nat Finkelstein, who is a Somerset resident and lives on Surrey Street and is a member of our board of directors. In fact, he's a vice president. He's an at-large member and has been on the board much longer than I have been and is a great contributor. So thank you for letting me interrupt.
Oh, thank you. Did either Bethesda, Chief K, did you want to add something?
No, I just want to say I think Ned did a really good job at addressing it. It's not, you know, COVID, we just don't always know what we're dealing with. And I will say that as it happens, one of my nephews is a firefighter in Houston, and we've had a lot of conversations, and I can only thank Ned and Chief Bailey, who was, I guess still is, the incident commander regarding COVID, for doing a phenomenal job at not only protecting the firefighters and emergency medical technicians that are coming to your house, but making sure that when we go in and we're dealing with the patients, if a patient doesn't have a face covering, we provide one for them, because it also protects us, but it also protects the patient. And these are now just part of our regular, I'm going to say, routine protocols. And I don't know if that's going to go away. Maybe Ned can answer that one, but I think a lot of the things in place are probably going to remain.
And did President O'Brien want to add it? Are you cool with that answer? Do you want to add anything?
Nothing on my end, no, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor, can I just say one? Mayor, can I say one
Yeah,
thing?
go for it. Go for it.
Not to belabor this, but there's such an interest in our COVID response that it may be worth another minute. As someone who rides pretty regularly with like Ned and Mike and Eric at Glen Echo, I can tell you that everything has changed how we do our work. Like Ned said, from the screening on the call to what units are sent, to having people meet us in the door, to limiting the number of the people who go inside, the equipment we carry, where we transport them, how we hand them off to the hospital, how they come back. Before we come on shifts, there's a screening process. If you've traveled abroad from certain places, you may be quarantined. If you have certain symptoms, you'd be quarantined. There's in-station decon. There's in-station mask requirements. I don't know if you've seen us riding around, but we have to have our masks on even when we're in the apparatus. There's social distancing. I can tell you there's not a single aspect of our operations that hasn't been scrubbed by Chief Bailey, Ned, working with others, that's filtered down to the field in how we do our work. And I think the philosophy has been in large part by protecting ourselves, we protect our families, and we protect the patients that we serve, not only for the call that we're running, but for the next call and the next call. So I, as a provider, and there are others on the call who do this work as well, I feel very confident that we're doing virtually everything we can, short of not responding, which of course we would never do. But everything we're doing has changed. Everything. And like, I don't know if I think Andrew said or someone said it, I'm not sure it's going to change back to the way it was. I think a lot of these protocols are going to be in place for years. As a resident nearby, I'm very confident that the county has done a fantastic job with the fire rescue service about how we're responding to this. But you know, we're always looking to do better too, as we learn from other departments.
I'll add one other thing that I forgot, and that is that this is also one of the shining examples of how the county very strongly benefits from a volunteer combination career system, because there's a lot of smart people that are volunteers that have other jobs that have helped with COVID. You know, we were lucky enough to form a COVID task force, which Chief Bailey's been using. It's led by a PhD epidemiologist. You know, if you want information on it, there's information on our website, because she was featured on CNN for her work. You know, so it's you know, it's a place where they've really benefited, and you know, they've used us in this Battalion 2 grant from the Rotary that everybody's going to be sharing in is also a sort of a lab for what the county's going to be picking up going forward, because it's easier for them to test something on a smaller scale and then roll it out there to the other, you know, 35 stations. So been quite an experience. You know, hopefully we're not going to have to do this again, but there's a lot of concern that we're making sure that we're even better prepared for the next wave if it comes.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Zwick. Is there any more questions?
No, I just want to, again, thank you all. I mean, I'm finding this discussion so comforting to hear from you all. And I'm so happy that Matt is recording this. And I'm hopeful that many other people, residents in our community, will listen, because I'm really getting a lot of comfort from listening to you all, especially during the COVID time. So thank you again.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Barr, do you have questions?
Yes. First of all, thank you for that extended discussion of COVID procedures. It's was very educational. It's very good to know that you're taking such care there. My question is actually on a different topic. It's to do with training. And what I don't understand is whether there's common training across the 3 stations. Is it mandatory training that's required of everybody? And does any station do more training than the common training?
Okay, we'll start with Bethesda.
There are minimum requirements in order to be what's called minimum qualified staffing, which requires an EMT class, which is, I'm not sure right now if it's 165 or 185 hours, plus some clinical time. Once you become minimum qualified, each of the stations has their own, I'm going to call it routine, daily, weekly training requirements for the providers. Each one is different. We're trying to set up on a weekly drill fashion at Bethesda. I can't speak to BCC's program currently or Glen Echo's currently.
Glen Echo, do you want to go next?
Thanks for asking Glen Echo again. We actually have a very rigorous training requirement, both county required and also I think that
Lieutenant Graves, I don't think we can hear you that well. Is there a way to put up your volume?
I will certainly try. Can you hear me now?
A little bit better.
It's a little better, yeah.
My apologies, Steve. We have a very rigorous training requirement, certification requirements for all of our personnel. The county establishes a baseline. That baseline includes not only the requirement that every single responder who is staffing one of our units must be an EMT. That is, once they get through their basic training, they have to at minimum be an EMT. Many are also medics or firefighters throughout the county in the volunteer system. That alone takes a substantial number of hours. And we estimate that it's well over 1,000 hours of training altogether before we will qualify someone for minimum staffing. That includes the EMT class, hazmat class, where they learn to deal with hazardous materials awareness, learning how to don and doff their PPE, the gear that they wear. The EMT class goes beyond just sort of a basic training in class. We have clinical time in the field. We then require that they take training and be checked off by preceptors before we will allow them to be what's referred to as a charge EMT. Additionally, they have to take classes on EEO, and we spend a great deal of time working with them to ensure that they're able to manage a call effectively. The in-house training does not end once they become a charge EMT. It is a continual process. Every year they have to take additional recertification classes, or really a refresher class in EMT, and we require a continuous learning experience for all of our members. It's quite a few hours. It's very demanding of their time, but it produces a very high quality provider. And we see evidence of that throughout the county with the LFRDs. I think that Montgomery County and all of our citizens in Somerset in particular should be very proud of the fact that we have one of the best volunteer career combined systems in the country. And that starts with the training that we do. I think that you're muted, sir.
Sorry, BCC, do you?
So just real quick, I think, one sort of overlying concept just to point out here, this system has some individual corporation management when it comes to personnel and in-station activities, but one of the goals of the county that they have achieved in a very excellent manner is that when the doors go up and 911 is called, we function as one Montgomery County Fire and Rescue Service. And basically that means that every person in the system, career and volunteer, has the same training and recognizes a command system, so that if a unit with personnel from 3 different aspects of the system shows up at a call at Wisconsin and Dorset, they can look around and figure out who's in charge, and they all have similar training, so that it's not like people from different planets arriving, to try and figure out what to do. That having been said, there's a lot of basic system training that everybody's already highlighted, and that includes monthly training requirements called minimum basic training, which everybody does to ensure everybody's on the same page in terms of all these calls. And then within that system, what we do is we have required training that each of our night crews do when they come in for duty. In the day crew, there's additional technical training for squad people. I mean, there is tremendous training, and it is really almost so incredible to believe. It's really hard for people to understand that people are doing this really as a second job, and it's I mean, the amount of dedication put in by these volunteer personnel in every department is truly unbelievable, and that's how this all works. And it's really a life passion, but that comes into the way they engage and really want all this training.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Barr, any more questions?
Well, I'll throw in just anybody wants to react. Is there a frequent flyer problem in our local area? Is really the question. In other words, ambulance being called too many times.
Okay, Chief Kay, do you want to answer that?
I'm going to say every once in a while, there are some super users amongst the community. And when there are, we actually have a procedure for that, and we notify the county EMS officer. There's some special notes that go in our reports so that the county can also follow up on these people if they do need a little, special attention or additional attention above and beyond what the fire and rescue service can provide normally.
Glenn Echo, do you want to respond to that?
I do. I think that Mike Kay really is on the spot. The key thing is that we try to keep in mind that these folks who are overusing the system sometimes, what really is the issue there is they often have needs that aren't being addressed by the system. Sometimes these needs or cry for help. Oftentimes that we need to engage social services to get involved. The county has put together a program that will actually send a nurse practitioner and a paramedic to these individuals' homes to discuss what their particular needs are. In some instances it's mental health, some instances it's substance abuse, a combination of those. Other times it's simply they don't have access to resources any other way than to call 911. And we want to be able to address that to mitigate the burden on the 911 system, but being very careful also not to neglect the needs of these folks, because just because they're calling frequently doesn't mean they have an intent to abuse it. We need to be careful to be respectful of them and treat them with dignity and try to help them get the resources that they need. And that's how we work in the system.
Thank you. BCC, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I would just say, so that the short answer is there is no, wealthy communities are not exempt from issues of social concern. And we are very fortunate that in Montgomery County, we have the services from the emergency medical services and integrated health that was just referred to. Also, BCC does respond to calls in DC, and there's a number of projects down there. I own a house and some other folks that really help, particularly with elderly. But the one thing I just would emphasize too is one of the things that I worry about as a supervisor is one of the biggest risks for EMS, both for patient care and also in terms of staying out of liability concerns, is making sure that we transport people and get them to the proper care. So a super user, in quotes, is a concern both in the fact that we want to get them the correct social services they need, but we also want to make sure we effectively assess them medically so we don't lose or don't leave somebody at the scene that really needs medical care, and it's just hiding behind an alcohol problem or something else, that we don't make a quick assumption and have a bad outcome. So it's a real balancing act. And that's why this extended social services is fantastic, because it allows you to leave somebody knowing that somebody else is going to follow up in a relatively, minor amount of time.
Okay, thank you. Before we take questions from our residents, could I ask our presenters if they would each have maybe up to 15 more minutes to participate, because I know that I had said 1 hour, and we're almost to 1 o'clock. Do each of you, can you hang on for another 10 or 15 minutes?
Yes, I am good.
Yes.
Thank you, everybody.
Mr.
Okay,
Mayor.
Mr. Town Manager.
Yes, I just wanted to let you know that I had raised hands from Steve Friedman and Barbara Condos. I'm not sure if they specifically were looking to answer Councilmember Barr's question or if they had something else to add. But I will.
So Councilmember Condos, did you want to ask another question?
Actually, I have something to add. For several years, my household was a super user, which sounds better than a frequent flyer. And the Montgomery County system certainly provided just a great deal of help. It was just an unfortunate situation. And I just wanted to say that we view that all three of these organizations have responded, and several others. So on occasion, Cabin John would come, and on occasion, Walter Reed would send an ambulance or a crew. So it's a real problem, but the county does have a system to deal with it. And it's a problem for the services, and it's a problem for the people who are needing the services. So I thank you all. And I just wanted you to know that the county really worked hard to solve the problem.
Okay, thank you. I think, okay, Steve Friedman, did you want to weigh in?
Actually, thank you, Jeff and Matt. I had 2 questions I'd like to pose to the panel here. And first off, by way of introduction, I'm a BCC member since 1996 and a Somerset resident since 1997. I appreciate that all the departments are here and represented. And in my years of running calls with BCC, where we've run calls with other departments, I've been able to enjoy nothing but the best collegial and professional interactions with other departments on those calls. I appreciate being a part of an organization like BCC and through an integrated structure like Montgomery County offers to benefit its residents. So thank you all. I want to touch base on a question that Barbara asked earlier and back that up a little bit. She was asking about how the decision is made about which hospital you go to. I like to back that up a little bit. As our community changes a bit, we have new residents moving in all the time. A lot of them are coming from outside of the Bethesda area. They're not familiar with how our organizations are set up. And more importantly, they're not entirely sure as to what to do when they need to get emergency help. In years past, we've had concerns because some calls, due to our proximity to DC, for example, have tripped over to a DC cell tower, things like that. We've also talked within the town about things that residents can do, such as ensure that they have their house numbers and adequate lighting so that emergency responders don't waste time getting to their homes. What advice can any of the departments here give residents about what information they need in order to properly place an EMS call? What else can they do in their local immediate vicinity to help ensure that there's no delay in getting help to them as needed? And then I had a second question, which I can pose now or wait until after everybody.
Well, why don't we get the, let's get Bethesda to respond to your first question.
Sure, thank you.
Well, one thing, in Montgomery, or if anybody's heard about the File of Life program, if you really want to help emergency responders when they come to your house, the kind of information that we need are honestly, aside from your personal data like address and all that, but the medications you're on and doses. The county and we can provide them if you just let me know how many you need. They have what's called a file of life, where you can write your medications. A lot of people have it typed up and they'll provide it to us. That helps a lot with some of the medical decisions that are made. And also it helps when you're taking a patient to an emergency room where maybe they haven't been before, and it helps them to see what medications the patient's on. And that way they can determine what tests or course of action they need to take. The other thing is, many of the streets, not so much in Somerset, but a lot of the streets in Chevy Chase are narrow. When you park your cars on the street, please leave adequate space for emergency apparatus to get through the neighborhood, especially when you're, close to a corner. Don't block fire hydrants. It may sound like common sense, but I hate to tell you how many dings and things occur, just because it happens. And if we can avoid things of that nature, that would make certainly some of our lives easier.
Okay, thanks. Glenn Echo, do you want to add anything?
I think you asked for Glenn Echo. I'm sorry for the having difficulty hearing you. I would also say, in addition to the file of life, before we arrive, first of all, as mentioned earlier, leave the lights on outside so we know that you're there and where you are. If you've got a storm door, leave the door open so we can quickly identify the proper property. If you've got a dog, restrain the dog. If it's a friendly dog, if you can just help restrain the dog, keep the dog out of the way. Because sometimes a dog is aggressive, sometimes a dog's just friendly. But in either case, we need to be able to work with the patient and not be trying to deal with a pet that is a little bit over exuberant. Televisions and background noise, if you can turn those off for us, so we don't have to ask you to do it, and turn the lights on, so we can better manage the patient and do our assessment on scene. The medication list is essential. Having someone who's sort of a point of contact and spokesperson, because when I walk in there with my crews, typically I'm going to be trying to a family member, and I'm going to want to know what's happened, get a little bit of immediate information about the incident, but also about pertinent medical history and whether or not the patient has allergies, things of this nature. And having someone ready to speak up and step in and share information is really critical for us.
Thank you. BCC, do you want to add anything?
So just two and a half quick notes. One, Montgomery County, and we haven't talked really much about them other than the fact that we're part of the system, but they've done a fantastic job at coming up with a website that has a lot of information about pre-planning your emergency. So I just encourage people to go to mcfrs.org, as in Montgomery County Fire Rescue Service.org, or BCC's website. We also have a lot of information and links there across a wide range of things. I will just say one thing completely sort of away from Somerset. One real problem in Montgomery County and nationally right now is people being struck on highways, emergency responders, by people who are not paying attention or on their phones or whatever. So we really do ask that people obey the move over laws when you're on the highway. But other than that, I think, in terms of preparedness in your community, go to mcfrs.org. There's a lot of great information there.
And Mayor, can I just add one other plug on?
Please do.
Yeah, not on the EMS side. Those are all great comments. Smoke detectors, smoke detectors, smoke detectors. They work. The new law requires folks to have 10-year sealed smoke detectors. They're readily available at Stroh-Snyder's or other Target or other places. They last 10 years. If you need assistance in checking yours or installing new ones, you can call any of our departments. Smoke detectors do save lives, and it is somewhat surprising how often we run fire calls where they're not working smoke detectors. Either they're not there or they're not working, usually because the battery is not working. But it's absolutely essential. The other thing is there's a lot of fire science these days about closing your door at night, and that's kind of a new education campaign in the county, that closing doors. So if there is, a fire in the basement or what have you, that can actually slow the spread of fire, and more importantly, the spread of smoke, which can give residents a chance to get out. So smoke detectors are the most important, I would say, on the fire side. And then at night, if you can, or during the day, close doors, that can help. But smoke detectors, number one on the fire side.
Thank you. Steve, did you have another question?
Yeah, and I just wanted to John's point, CO detectors too.
Yep.
You can get a combined unit, you can get separate units, and knowing where to put them, I think, is really essential down by the laundry rooms or furnaces, et cetera, that typically give off those discharges. So thank you. So the second question I had touches on an earlier response by Chief Sherburne around funding sources. And I think that in talking with a lot of my neighbors over the years, there's a lot of confusion, not just about who shows up and why, but who's paying for what and when and by how much. And so there's a common perception around the fact that career stations are paid for out of our taxes, but then we see departments send out fundraising materials. So can you each explain a little bit about how you're primarily funded, what mechanisms you use, the timing around that, so that residents have a better sense as to what's real, what's spam, and where they should be contributing?
Okay, thank you. Michael, do you want to start?
Sure. So Bethesda normally does 2 mail solicitations a year. We don't go door to door. One thing we're trying to get out is more informational newsletters, not to provide information to the community, not for solicitations. The money that we collect goes to support the stations. And I say that because it supports the volunteers, the career staff. It goes to support our programs. Right now, we've got a training center we just got a permit for. We're actually trying to create a 2nd Battalion training center so that the stations in the area, meaning Glen Echo, BCC, Cabin John, and Chevy Chase, don't have to go all the way up to Gaithersburg, Durwood, to the training academy, but they can come down to Station 6 and do in-house training locally and not be away from the area for so long. Those are the kinds of things that we're funding. The county, again, at least for the career staff, they take care of their salaries and benefits, things of that nature. We try to provide some nice extras. The career staff, they're there, 96 hours every 2-week period. It's kind of like a second home. And we try to make the stations comfortable, homey, because their shifts are kind of like their second families, just like your duty night crew. It's kind of like your second family. You're with them, you know, once a week. You're with them however often. So we try to give people what they need and what not always in some items what the county doesn't supply.
Thank you, Glenn Echo. Do you want to answer that?
Sure, thank you. Happy to. From our perspective, we tend to, very similar to Bethesda, we tend to do 2 to 3 mailings a year to help raise funds. The majority of the funding to support our volunteer component comes from residents in the immediate community supporting us. We also, in most years, obviously this year a little different, but we tend to have an open house and a bingo night at the Glen Echo Park and other sort of community facing activities that enable us to generate support, and then grants and other funds help supplement that. As Michael mentioned, the volunteer corporation owns our building. I mentioned we've been in our current facility since 1954, so we are in the midst of a capital fundraising project to raise funds to do a large scale renovation of our facility. And we know that we will be relying on our community support to help do that. But as I sort of said, a majority of our funding comes from our community residents who support us, and we're certainly appreciative of their support. We do try to spread the word to help generate additional funds and apply for grants when we can.
Thank you. And now, Chief Sherburne, do you want to?
I'm going to pass to John Benevolio.
Sure. We're a little different in this regard. For decades, and as Ned described before, we're staffed primarily with volunteers at nights and on weekends for minimum staffing, and then during the day, all but one person is actually an employee of the BCC Rescue Squad. So, like the other departments, we own our building and need to maintain that. But we also purchase all of our own equipment and vehicles through donated funds, and some county support, but primarily through donated funds. So you'll probably see more fundraising activity by BCC Rescue Squad than the other 2 departments, because we can't really live without it. We can't meet our minimum staffing obligations without community support. And we think actually by going to the community and seeking funds for the building for all of our ambulances and the heavy rescue squads and command vehicles, training equipment and the like, that actually keeps us pretty close to the community through those development efforts. We also actively solicit funding from foundations and other charitable organizations, and that's important to us. We used to go door to door. This is important. Every year we'd have a fall drive. People would see us knocking on doors in our uniforms asking for donations. Several years ago, we ended that. It's just too much of a commitment on volunteers to ask them to do all the training that was discussed, to ride as much as we expect and need them to ride, and then to go knock on doors. In addition, I think people are just a little less comfortable these days opening the door, even if they see us in uniform, even if they see a unit nearby with an indicia that we're legit. I think people just don't like being solicited. So we have stopped that, and all of our activities are largely through the mail or other solicitation efforts. I will say, unfortunately, there are some scams going around, not by any of the departments here, but by other organizations that are not your local fire rescue departments, soliciting funding. And I don't know about the other departments. We never solicit by phone, and this improper and I think fraudulent activity has been done sometimes in our department's names by phone solicitors. So I don't want to discourage you from picking up the phone if it's a Glen Echo or Bethesda solicitor on the phone, but we never solicit by phone. And in our experience, some of the improper solicitations that occur, that most likely, or most often occurs by phone. But you know, the bottom line is we're I think a little bit unlike the other departments. You know, we're dependent on community donations to provide the basic services we provide, and we like that model. It's a lot of work, but we like that model.
Okay,
So,
thank
Mr.
you.
Mayor?
Mr. Town Manager, are there any other, anybody else raised their hand?
There was just one question submitted to me. It was a topic that was sort of touched on by Steve Friedman, but I wanted to specifically see if there were any reactions or responses to recommendations on making sure that house numbers are visible. People were wondering about the house numbers on their house, and then also if it's useful to have the house numbers on the curbs near their house.
Okay, let's go around this and then make this the last question, because the presenters have been very indulgent with their time. So Chief K, would you like to answer that, please?
House numbers are extremely important. Thank you for bringing it up. Houses don't always go in order. Sometimes they skip several due to vacant lots or whatever. Clearly post your house number and make it lit. I mean, in the day it may look really nice, but at 3 o'clock in the rain, when you're trying to get emergency equipment to a house and it's maybe dark numbers with dark paint and you really can't get the house number, you don't necessarily want to be knocking on the wrong door. And also it will delay the response. So addresses properly posted, illuminated, very nice feature.
Thank you. Glen Echo.
Nothing I would add to that. I don't know if Victor has anything.
Okay.
A bold, large, clear, near the street, lit, reflective. You know, I still run a lot of calls, and I can tell you, getting out there tonight at 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm lucky to be able to see my hand in front of my face. And I really want to be able to identify the street numbers, and having not just one person in the street, but as many people in the street number their houses as possible is definitely the way to speed up our response.
Thanks. Last word from BCC.
I would offer two things to answer the question specifically about the curb numbers. Depends on how visible the house numbers are from the house. If the house numbers are really visible, then I don't think the curb numbers are as important. One other thought, if you live on a corner house, especially if the numbers on the adjacent street are in the same family of numbers as the ones on the street that you live on, it can also be valuable to add the street name next to the sign, if you have a sign. So for example, if you live in the 8400 block, you know, or 5400 block may be more appropriate to Somerset, and the adjacent street is also 5000, 5100, something like that, that can be confusing. If the numbers are way off, like the adjacent street is 8,000, then that's usually not a problem. But corner houses, depending if they don't sit square in the lot, sometimes they can be confusing.
Okay, well, thank you. So I note that we've come to the end of our discussion, and I think this, I'm sure speaking on behalf of the council, this has been incredibly enlightening and informative, and you're all so impressive. We appreciate so much the fire and rescue service that we get in Somerset, and we look forward to working with you in the future and continuing the dialogue. So thank you, everyone, and we'll be in touch with you.
Yes,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.